140s, and I'm sure some of you know some of these kids. Some have very techie brains, and some of them have fascinations with other things. My son can tell you just about any record in the doo-wop field from maybe even up to back to the 1930s all the way up to the mid-60s. He doesn't really like anything after the 60s. A little bit of East Coast rap, but it's specific. So what that means is when you fall off the cliff of services, that means that even if you were diagnosed at birth or in childhood with a disability, you now have to go through the arduous process of proving to the state and federal government that you have a permanent disability. It is not going to get better. Now, if these kids are left on their own to do it, that's a challenge. How many people know what executive functioning skills are? You ever heard that phrase? We got one person here. So what that means is if someone comes to you and says, I need you to do this project, I need you to prepare me a PowerPoint with 10 slides by Friday, and here's what I wanted to say. You say, okay, go back to your office, what do I do first? What do I do next? What do I do next? For a person with autism, that sounds like, go build the Eiffel Tower in 2 days. Because they can't understand the steps to get from A to B. Oh, I'm so sorry. So these are the things that we as parents have to deal with every single day, from the time our kids are diagnosed all the way up through high school. And I'm not going to go through all of these things because, as you can see, there are a lot of them. But these are things that we have to consider as parents when we are trying to raise our kids. Now, what that means for most of us parents is that we don't get to work full time. So we lose half of our workforce time, even if we've gone to college, even if we have lots and lots of skills, because we have doctor's appointments and therapist appointments and all of this paperwork to keep track of. I personally have 3 file boxes full of paperwork to hand over to my son. That's a lot, right? And then when you consider applying to SSI, vocational rehabilitation, ADA services, trying to find living arrangements that are affordable and accessible, and that you feel safe for your kiddo to live there, it's a big deal. The average young person on the spectrum has 6 people who are on their team. That doesn't include their parents. So you got your kid and your parent, you got a case manager with the Department of Mental Health. This is our personal team, our family team. Social Security, Medicaid, primary care physician, psychiatrist, job coach, and a life skills community coach. So who do you think keeps in touch with all these people? It's a mom, right? Now, of course, being a young adult who is not under guardianship, which is a whole other discussion, he gets to make a lot of these decisions himself. But just like any young person, when he can't figure it out, I'm getting a phone call. And when I talk to all the parents that have been involved in this process and said, how many phone calls a day do you get from your kiddo when they first moved out on their own? The minimum number I heard was 9. The highest number I heard was 17. And the way I feel about that is 17 phone calls a day from your kid is a part-time job. How do you hold down your full-time? How would your boss feel if you were taking 17 personal phone calls a day, right? So my solution is LIFEbinder. It's a twofold solution. The first part of it is an actual web app that has secure Google integration that allows the parents to come in and say, okay, here's the things you need to know in order to participate in your world. That whole big conference table I showed you, here's how you get in touch with your DMH case manager. Here's why. Here are the times of year that you need to be able to report, because there's annual reporting. Anybody who says that getting social services support is easy has never had to apply for social services. All right? Then we actually have an actual binder. It is an actual binder. And the reason for that is that a lot of this information is HIPAA protected. A lot of it has identifying features on it. There are some things you just don't want to put in the cloud. And especially when you're talking about people with disabilities, they're particularly vulnerable for having identity theft because they're not applying for credit cards, they're not paying attention. And unless they are specifically seeking out that information, they end up on the short end of the stick. So part of this is that we want to train the trainer. We are going to teach the parents how to teach their kids. And then the parents put it all together and say, all right, let me show you how to do this. Let me show you how to make your choices. And then the kiddo gets to take over that account with mom in the background, able to still peek in through her trusted account access to be able to say, did he do the things? Oh, I need to add doctor's appointment to his calendar. So that we can cut down on those 17 phone calls a day. And so that our children don't feel like we are calling them constantly and saying, don't forget to do this, don't forget to do that. Remember when you moved to college and you were like, oh, Mom, I'm a grown up now. I get that even from my 21-year-old who still lives in my basement. So, what does this mean for a market share? 57.6 million people in the United States over the age of 5 identify as having a disability. That's almost 20% of the American population. That's the same as the combined total population of New York, Texas, and Michigan. Think about that. 3 whole states. That 50,000 number, imagine Busch Stadium filled to the brim. That's how many kids are falling off this cliff every year. This is why we need to put this together. And it is a market that is available. People with disabilities in the United States, now of course, take disposable with a grain of salt. I think we all have our own definitions of what constitutes disposable income. $645 billion a year is disseminated to people with disabilities. Globally, it's in the trillions. When you look at friends and family, because again, if we're talking about 1 out of every 5 people who's affected by a disability, that means everybody's connected, right? Whether it's their child, whether it's a sister, whether it's a parent, we have to take care of them. So the thing for LIFEbinder is that we will be moving forward past the autism market to incorporate the elder care market. This, as everybody has been hearing about, oh, the boomer generation, we're getting older. And people don't live and stay in the same towns that they used to anymore. So that means you have elders and parents who are living across the state, sometimes across the country, and often with multiple caregivers, sisters, friends, neighbors, right? So being able to have that communication tool to know what's going on instead of relying on this series of text messages and emails and notebooks makes for a much easier and more accessible process, which is our goal. Now, we are still developing the product, so we are excited to talk to more people. We have been talking with people throughout the state of Missouri. We are working with George Mason University on an IRB right now so that we can expand that and incorporate more families and more agencies that serve people with disabilities. Because part of what we want to know is, how long does it take somebody to get the information to you that you need? How much time does that add on from the time that they apply for services to the time they actually receive services? If you have a person who doesn't know how to make a list, trying to provide you information that they never accessed or filed. So as I'm explaining this to you, I hope that you're understanding that this is not just a tool for the young people with autism. Those are definitely the people we're trying to help, but this is also, and most importantly, a tool for families. We know that we are not always going to be around for our kids. We know they're not always going to live in our basement. And we have to figure out how to provide them those tools so that they're not stuck living in an institution, so they don't end up homeless or worse. This constitutes a greater problem, but it also constitutes a greater solution. So I do invite anybody, someone who's affected by autism, please tell them to go visit our website. Tell them to sign up for updates. We want folks to be able to participate in this process, to tell us what they need. What are the things that are lacking? What would make the tools easier and better for them to use? We're going to be working on that user experience, making it so that the young people can get what they need out of the process, and then help turn helicopter moms into drone moms. We're still here, you just can't see us. Thank you very much.
Out there, you're going to have to answer questions now.
Oh, I have to answer questions now.
Who would like to start with the questions?
Thank you for your presentation.
Yes.
It's really good.
Well, thank you.
So, this is potentially down the road a very crowded space. What do you see as your current or planned key differentiators between competitors?
Well, the competitor list is interesting because while it sounds like we are doing things that other people are doing, and certainly there are aspects of what we are doing that are in the space. I'm not going to say I'm doing something nobody's ever done before. But The goal of this is to put families and caregivers and the individuals themselves in the position of being their own case managers. That's not something that's been able to be provided to them up until now. And that's why we're making this tool. Because we know that there's an analog side to it and a digital side to it. We know that portability is key. We know that security is key. And those things are well known throughout the autism community. For us, it's much more about the empowerment factor and the ability of the families to participate in that learning process instead of relying on social service agencies that are already terribly overburdened.
That makes sense, thanks. And a quick question, it's not really
Yes.
a follow-up question, but within, people say 30 and under, there's a strong preference in communication channels.
Yes.
For just messaging, not phone calls, all that kind of thing.
Yes.
Is that reflected within the population that you're serving as well, or is it a different dynamic there?
I think that it really depends on the kiddo, and that's the thing. When you're working with folks on the spectrum, everybody is so different. My son could spend hours playing on his computer and playing his online games with his friends. But I can text him and come home 6 hours later and I'm like, did you get my text? And he's like, what? Now, I don't know if that's a kid thing or an autism thing. It could depend. But the whole idea behind this is to figure out a platform, which is why we're starting it off as a web app rather than a smartphone app. Because something like a little more than half of young people with autism have a comorbidity. That means they have another mental disorder usually that's tied to it. And when you think about something like that, what if they can't see well? What if they can't read well? Because the words all scramble up on them. There's going to be need for the different kinds of tools, and that's why we provided the analog version. So if you need to go slowly and you need to reread and not have the electric interference, you can do so.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
How far along are you in developing this app?
We have just completed the prototype of the binder. We are in process of developing the web application. We just started this whole thing last fall. And as I was telling a couple folks this morning, I've learned way more about intellectual property law in the last 2 weeks than I ever wanted to know. So it's a process. Having an idea and having excitement about it is a wonderful thing. The roadmap to that is a whole other. I have been blessed with the opportunity to get involved with the Washington University Social Enterprise and Innovation Competition. I was a finalist this year for that. And last week, if you attended, I received the Innovate Her Women's Business Challenge Award for the St. Louis SBDC. So we are getting validation for our idea, and we are moving forward in terms of developing the application, but I anticipate we probably won't do a full launch until January of 2018.
How much money do you need to get started?
That's a good question, because what does getting started mean? Getting to the point where we're selling stuff, getting to the point where we're making money?
To the point where you can beta test it.
I would probably say at this point in the 100K neighborhood total. Right now, I'd be really thrilled if anybody would like to hand me a check for about $40,000. I'd love to buy you dinner or even maybe make you dinner.
Questions?
You mentioned that 20% of the population has filed for some type of disability.
Not filed, like they self-identify as a person with a disability.
So
And that's according to the census.
According to the census, so what percentage has not, or the census doesn't know about?
That's a good question. And again, like absence of data doesn't really provide you with data. So that's kind of a hard question to answer. It's been estimated, especially because amongst minority communities, things like autism and developmental disabilities are not really given the same amount of attention. Some of that is due to lack of information, lack of resources. Some of that is simply due to just not having dealt with such a thing in one's family before. Different areas of the community handle mental health issues in different ways. So I would say there's probably easily another 1 million or 2 that probably have some sort of developmental disability that's not yet been diagnosed. But again, without stepping forward into a doctor's office and specifically requesting those things. It's not part of a typical diagnostic process in our education system. You have to ask for it.
So how are you going to sell this thing?
Software as a service is going to be subscription based.
I mean, like the approach to the customer. For example, like I have another job as a waiter, and probably 2 or 3 times a week I'll have a table with a developmentally disabled child.
Yes.
And like, do you want to like pay me to hand out your business card, or like how are you going to?
Are you looking for a job? Is that what's going on? It's really, honestly, I've been working with the Department of Mental Health. I've been working with nonprofit agencies around the area. Again, since my son was diagnosed at age 3, I've been working within the Missouri city and county system for the last 18 years. I've developed a lot of contacts during that time who have been participating in our research process, and all of them are very, very interested in getting the product into the family's hands so we can get that testing going. So on the one hand, we're going to be marketing to families, and it's obviously going to be online. There's going to be some discussion, there's going to be presentations, but then secondarily, we're going to work with those nonprofit agencies and provide opportunities for CEU education surrounding supported decision making and things of that nature that are very, very important to this age of the community, and allowing for those packages to provide a certain number of memberships that the case managers can then hand out to the students, or young adults in this case. And the good thing about that is, who do these kids trust? They trust their teachers, they trust their parents, they trust folks who have been working with them for quite some time. They're not going to trust somebody they see on TV or on the radio. It needs to come from a trusted member of their support network.
So I have a question now.
Yes.
I say this, you mentioned the senior market, and
Yes.
last year my father was Parkinson's, he fell down, broke his hip, had a whole bunch of complications. It was a 2-month nightmare, quite frankly, and it just about killed my mom. And half of it was just the conveying of information, quite
Yes.
frankly, from my dad's siblings to because my mom she couldn't be out there the whole time. It's just not possible. She works, she has everything, blah, blah, blah. And, but it was the conveying of information that we found was such a problem.
Yes.
We wrote down everything, but then you don't quite know what someone wrote down. You can't read their writing. So it seems to me, I don't know if this is a question as much as more of a comment, but I wish you would could you speak a little more on the senior market? Because I think that is, you're right, it is a huge market, and it is something that everyone thinks they can handle until they're in it. And then you realize it's almost overwhelming.
Right. So our CFO, his name's Steve. Steve has an uncle who lives in New York, and his uncle is quadriplegic, sorry about that. So as long as he has a support person to help him get up in the morning and get in his chair, he's good to go. He doesn't want to leave New York. It's very accessible. He has friends. He has lots of possibilities and supports. But if there's not that person there in the morning to help get him out of bed and use the restroom, get showered, things of that nature, he's stuck in bed all day. Now, all of his family's here in St. Louis, and he's in New York City. So what happens when you get that phone call that says, oh, the nurse called in sick today, or oh, there's 3 feet of snow on the ground and nobody can get anywhere? That's exactly the sort of thing that we're trying to get up on. I had another story of a woman who, she and her sister and brother were taking care of their mom who has Alzheimer's. And they had been keeping a literal binder with all of their notes in it about her medications and how she was feeling and what she would eat or not eat that week. And the mom came across it one day when one of the daughters was downstairs doing laundry, and in her Alzheimer's brain thought that the CIA was keeping a dossier on her and shredded the entire thing. Right? Like years of history. I had a laptop that I kept a bunch of my son's history on. Went out to my husband, you know what, I need to get an external drive that we can keep this on just so I don't lose anything. The very next day, teenagers broke into my house and stole my laptop before I could transfer the data. So these are the same sorts of things that we're trying to combat. If you have 2 or 3 people who are trying to provide care for someone, how do you communicate with them? Is it a pile of text messages? Is it constant phone calls? Are you trying to send emails? How are you accessing that if you're, for example, a school teacher and you have to give other people your attention most of the time? So these are all things that we are taking into consideration as we develop the user experience of the product, so that we can understand the lifestyle of the folks, not only who are the initial users, like in the case of folks with autism and probably depression and a few other things that are categorized as disabilities in this country. People can largely take care of themselves, But you go to the doctor and I say, hey, so you said a few years ago you took Abilify. How long did you take it? What was the dosage? Why did you stop? Who can remember what medication they took 3 years ago for a doctor they don't see anymore? And how? And then you're like, oh, let me look at my Walgreens app and see if the info is in there. Well, you can do that because you are a person with neurotypical functioning and have those executive functioning skills. If I am a person with autism, that means every single application, as wonderfully unique as they are, means everything is different. And if you know anything about autism at all, consistency is key. Having the ability to understand those processes is key. When we're talking about the elder care market, we may be talking about some folks who are computer savvy. I mean, my dad's 66 years old and he actually went to WashU for computer science in the 70s. So I'm not really worried about whether or not my dad can use an interface. But my grandmother would be a totally different thing. So it depends on what the usability factor is. But I do see that there is a huge market for it. And as we go forward and people are talking about personal health records and the HIPAA compliance issues and all the things that surround it, one of the things that you can do to combat that is self-report. If I hand you a piece of paper with my information on it, I don't have to sign anything for you to do, for you to receive it. I'm giving it to you. And it's the same sort of thing of powers of attorney for parents and anything else, but it's a matter of keeping all of that straight. When you change doctors, if you're using Medicaid and Medicare and you happen to be working in a clinic system where you never see the same doctor twice, all of these things seem to be very overwhelming. And so as a person who has a kid with autism and parents that are in their late 60s, I know that at some point I'm going to be in the middle of both of those. Yes?
Right, no, yeah, this is my comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just wondering if you could provide a little more info on who you plan on paying for it. Just because from the background of so recently I went to the doctor and they have my chart now. So my chart, is the software where we're adding in all the information of when your visit,
Yes.
and speaking with the doctors and things. So do you see that as a competitor? Because so they're actually going
No.
through and they're having the not competitor, but I guess in the same way you could almost frame it, that they're having, the office pay for this software. So who do you see paying for it?
Parents are paying for the software. Our early adopters are most definitely parents, primarily females. It's mostly moms that end up taking care of this stuff. No offense to dads, it's just the way that it rolls. And then most of these young adults that we're working with are male. So we have to take both of those things into consideration. And then once mom moves out of the house, kiddo's going to be taking it over. Well, if you have, I don't want to be blowing out price points or anything, but if you think about the software being $9.99 a month or in that arena, it's something that can be budgeted in to a person's monthly life. Because it is a tool for independence, there is the possibility that it can be covered by existing waivers for folks who are already approved for things like Medicaid waivers and community supports. There's also the potential to work with places like Center for Head Injury Services or Goodwill and other organizations that provide direct service and say we could create an OEM version of this for you so that you can choose exactly the information you need so you can extrapolate data sets that are useful for reporting on your state and federal grants.
All right, you got the last question.
Oh, thank you. Apropos of what she just brought up,
Yes.
is it possible to utilize the templates from medical records software to then elaborate with,
Possibly. Again, it's one of those things where when you're developing a product, you have to look at all aspects of it. You have to see what already exists out there. And if somebody's already invented the wheel, why are you redoing it? But you also then have to consider, how does that fit into your model? Do they even want to work with you? Maybe they don't want to license their stuff. Maybe they want to hold on to it tightly. So we are currently developing our very own forms because I'm writing these as a mom of a kiddo with autism. So the things that I need to know out of a medication form are pretty different than the stuff that one would need to know for geriatric care or for someone who has ADHD or someone who has cerebral palsy and has a lot more physical issues going on.
All right, well, thank you very much, Vicki.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
And I believe that is it. Yeah.
That's it.